I ran a half marathon time trial, and this was the clearest indicator so far whether breaking 3 hours in the Düsseldorf Marathon is actually realistic for me or not. I ended up running 1:24:35, which is a PR, yay! And I also happened to run a 10K PR of 39:43 during the effort. But what I'm happiest about the most is not just the time itself, but how the run felt and what the data says about it. So in this video, I want to break down the run properly, look at the pacing, the heart rate, and have a look at what the effort says about my chances of actually breaking sub-3 in the marathon 5 weeks from now. To give you some context, this time trial came right in the middle of my marathon build. So this wasn't done off a proper taper, and it wasn't on completely fresh legs. It also happened to be the first time ever that I actually ran a half marathon all out. I'd been improving my half marathon PR almost weekly during this block, within long runs, with marathon pace segments, with my best effort so far being 1:32. The goal with this time trial was obviously to run as fast as possible, but also to test where my fitness is right now in the middle of training and see whether the sub-3 goal is actually starting to look realistic. Looking at both how the run felt and how it played out, I think this was a very encouraging result. Not just because of the result, but because I paced it well, stayed controlled early, and finished strong in the last kilometers. So let's take a look at how the run actually played out. Going into the time trial, I didn't want to go out too hard from the start. I wanted to use the opportunity to practice pacing, and the plan was to keep it controlled early on, find a rhythm, and then see if I could build into the effort in the second half. And if we look at the pacing, you can clearly see how that played out. The first half was slightly more conservative, and from there the pace gradually picked up throughout the run. I actually ended up running the second half faster than the first, which means it was a negative split. And that's generally what you want to see in a well-executed race or time trial. Instead of going out too hard and slowing down, you stay in control early and finish strong. And that matches how it felt as well, even though I went out a bit stronger than I had initially planned. I felt strong from the start though, and it felt more like I was building into the effort, still being able to push in the last kilometers. It definitely didn't feel like I would have been hanging on towards the end or having to fight hard to survive. That tells me that I probably stayed just under my limit for most of the run, which is exactly where you want to be in a half marathon. Another thing I paid attention to during the run was how my heart rate was developing over time. What stands out is that it stayed pretty stable throughout the run. It came up a bit in the beginning as the effort settled in, but after that, it didn't really drift upwards in any significant way. Only at the very end it came up again, but that's when I was pushing hard to finish strong. Often if the effort is too hard, you start seeing cardiac drift, which is when the heart rate creeps up, even when running at the same pace. And that didn't really happen here, which suggests that the effort was controlled and sustainable rather than something that I would have been forcing. That's more or less how it felt as well. I was definitely working hard, but not redlining, and managed to stay in control the whole way. Overall, just based on the data, this looks like a strong, controlled effort that stayed just on the right side of my limits, also pushing at the right moment at the end. Now the question is, what does a run like this actually say about the marathon and my potential in it? I ran 1:24:35 for the half marathon, which is just about 4-minute pace per kilometer, and for a sub-3-hour marathon, the target pace is around 4:15. So there's roughly a 15-second difference per kilometer between the two. That's a pretty good gap to have, especially considering this wasn't done off a taper, and it came in the middle of a relatively high mileage week. Actually, my highest mileage week ever so far. It suggests that marathon pace should sit clearly below my threshold rather than just on top of it, which is exactly what you want when going into a marathon. At the same time, a half marathon is still a very different kind of effort. You're running for an hour and a half here, whereas the full marathon is going to be close to 3 hours in my case. And the real challenge isn't going to be holding the pace early on, but what happens after 30 or 35 kilometers when the fatigue really starts to accumulate. And that's something that this run doesn't really answer. That's something that the long runs are there for. So I'd say this puts me in a position where sub-3 is definitely realistic at this point, but it's still right on the edge. It's going to come down to pacing, fueling, and how well I can maintain that pace when fatigue starts kicking in late in the race. But based on this run, I feel like I'm exactly where I need to be 5 weeks out from the marathon. The long runs I've stacked so far, and the ones I still have ahead of me, should help me prepare for the late race fatigue. So all in all, this was a really satisfying run. Not just because it was a PR, but because of how it felt and how it played out. A few months ago, just the thought of breaking 3 hours felt a bit delusional, but now it feels like something that's actually within reach, and I have good data to back it up, which is a really nice place to be. At the same time, I know there's still a lot of work to be done. The focus now is on recovering properly from this effort, and then continuing to build in the next few weeks. I still have a few important long runs and workouts ahead of me, which will probably be just as important, if not more important than this run. So yeah, the goal is just to stay consistent, stay healthy, and keep building towards the race. I'm hyped and overjoyed about this result, but the work continues. If you're interested in seeing how this marathon prep continues and you want to follow along in real time, join the Elaborate Runners community on School. It's a community full of runners from all around the world, sharing their training, breaking PRs, and supporting each other along the way. Inside, you also get access to marathon plans for different distances, training tools like personalized heart rate zones and pace zones, as well as a race predictor for different distances. If any of that resonates with you, click the link in the description and join now. I'd love to see you on the inside.